The officer saw a parked car. He did not see the man whose name could change the future of justice in that city. It was an ordinary afternoon in Brookdale, a city where thousands of people moved through busy streets every day without knowing the stories carried by the strangers around them. A black sedan sat quietly near a downtown office building, looking no different from the countless vehicles parked along the streets of America. There was nothing about the car that revealed the responsibility, dedication, or years of service connected to its owner. The vehicle was simple. The story behind it was not. Marcus Reynolds had spent most of his life studying the law, defending fairness, and working toward a justice system that protected every person equally. As the district attorney of Brookdale County, he carried a position built on trust and responsibility. But outside the courtroom, away from official meetings and public events, Marcus was simply a person going through his day. He did not expect recognition everywhere he went. He did not believe his title made him more important than anyone else. To Marcus, respect was something every person deserved before anyone knew their achievements. That belief had shaped his entire career. He had seen how quickly assumptions could influence decisions. He had witnessed how a person's appearance, location, or circumstances could create a story that was incomplete. That was why he always believed patience and understanding were essential parts of justice. A few miles away, Officer Daniel Whitaker began his shift like any other day. After years in law enforcement, he believed experience helped him recognize problems quickly and respond effectively. He took pride in doing his job and believed that maintaining order required confidence and attention. Like many officers across the country, Daniel understood that small decisions could have larger consequences. But he also knew that every situation began with limited information. On that afternoon, he noticed the vehicle and focused on what he could immediately observe. He did not know the owner was the person responsible for representing justice in Brookdale County. He did not know the quiet man connected to that car had spent years inside courtrooms, studying the very principles that guided his own work. From Daniel's perspective, it was a routine matter. From Marcus's perspective, it was another reminder of how quickly people could be judged without knowing the complete truth. Neither man realized that a simple decision involving an ordinary vehicle would soon become a much larger conversation about authority, fairness, and accountability. The car was not special because of its brand or appearance. It was special because of the person connected to it and the lesson that would follow. Sometimes history does not begin with a dramatic moment. Sometimes it begins with something small that reveals something much bigger. And on this day, a parked car became the beginning of a story that would challenge the way people understood power, responsibility, and justice. The first thing Daniel Whitaker noticed was not the person behind the vehicle. It was the situation in front of him. Every day, law enforcement officers across America made decisions based on the information available at that exact moment. They looked at details, reviewed circumstances, and tried to determine the right response. Daniel believed experience helped him recognize patterns and handle situations efficiently. After years wearing the badge, he had learned that small details could sometimes reveal larger issues. But there was one thing experience could never fully provide. Could not reveal a person's entire story before a conversation began. Daniel had built his career around responsibility. He respected the role he carried and understood that a badge represented public trust. To him, being an officer was not only about enforcing rules. It was about protecting the community and making decisions that affected real people. That responsibility was something he took seriously. However, like every person, Daniel only saw the information available to him. He did not know that the vehicle belonged to Marcus Reynolds, the district attorney of Brookdale County. He did not know that the quiet man nearby had spent years inside courtrooms, fighting for fairness and studying the very system Daniel served every day. Meanwhile, Marcus watched the situation develop with patience. He understood that moments like this often revealed more than just what happened on the surface. They revealed how people approached uncertainty. Marcus had built his career by listening before making decisions. He knew that justice required more than rules. It required context, understanding, and the willingness to see beyond first impressions. He could have immediately introduced himself and explained his position, but he chose not to. His decision was not about hiding his identity. It was about observing the situation without allowing his title to influence the outcome. Marcus believed that every person deserved to be treated with respect before their accomplishments were known. That principle had guided him throughout his legal career. As the afternoon continued, the distance between the two men represented something larger than a simple misunderstanding. One man carried visible authority through a badge. The other carried invisible authority through years of legal service. One represented the enforcement of laws. The other represented the responsibility of protecting the meaning behind those laws. Neither fully understood the significance of the moment yet. Daniel saw a routine situation requiring attention. Marcus saw an opportunity to understand how quickly assumptions could shape decisions. The difference between them was not their commitment to responsibility. Both believed they were doing what they were supposed to do. The difference was the information they had and the perspective they carried. Sometimes the most important lessons begin when people realize they do not know the entire story. The vehicle remained just a vehicle. The street remained just a street. But the encounter between a police officer and a district attorney was quietly becoming something much larger. It was becoming a test of judgment, patience, and the true meaning of accountability. Marcus Reynolds had spent years learning one important lesson about justice. The truth is rarely found in the first few seconds of any situation. Before becoming the district attorney of Brookdale County, he had built his career by studying people, listening carefully, and understanding that every decision carried consequences beyond the moment itself. He had stood in courtrooms where facts mattered, where emotions could influence judgment, and where fairness depended on seeing the complete picture. That experience shaped the way he responded when he found himself in an unexpected situation involving his own vehicle. Marcus knew that his position gave him influence, but he also knew that using influence too quickly could change the meaning of an encounter. He did not want his title to become a shortcut. He wanted the situation to be handled based on the same principles he expected from the justice system every day. Years earlier, before becoming one of the most respected legal figures in the county, Marcus had watched communities struggle with the difference between authority and accountability. He understood that authority was easy to recognize. It came with uniforms, official positions, and public titles. Accountability was different. It was measured by choices made when nobody expected attention. That belief became one of the foundations of his career. Marcus often reminded younger attorneys that the law was not only about knowing rules. It was about understanding people affected by those rules. Meanwhile, Daniel Whitaker continued viewing the situation through the responsibilities of his own profession. He had no knowledge of Marcus's background, achievements, or years of service. To him, the person standing nearby was simply someone connected to a vehicle that required attention. Daniel was not seeing a district attorney. He was seeing a situation that needed to be addressed. The contrast between their perspectives created the tension of the moment. Marcus carried years of experience with the justice system, while Daniel carried years of experience enforcing community standards. Both men believed responsibility mattered. Both believed their roles existed to serve others. Yet both were approaching the moment from completely different viewpoints. Imagine standing in a situation where one person knows the entire story and the other only knows the first chapter. The challenge is not only discovering the truth. The challenge is how people respond before the truth arrives. Marcus understood that revealing his identity would immediately change the conversation. People often react differently when they discover someone's position, career, or influence. But Marcus believed respect should not appear only after recognition. It should exist from the beginning. The afternoon continued, and the ordinary scene around them remained unchanged. Cars passed through the streets. People continued their daily routines. Most had no idea that a quiet interaction was becoming a powerful lesson about perception and responsibility. Neither Marcus nor Daniel knew exactly where the moment would lead. But both were about to learn that a single decision could reveal much more than a person's authority. It could reveal their understanding of fairness, judgment, and the responsibility that comes with power. The moment that had seemed ordinary began to take on a different meaning as the details surrounding the situation became clearer. For Marcus Reynolds, the experience was not about the vehicle itself. It was about what the moment represented. Throughout his career as the district attorney of Brookdale County, Marcus had seen how small decisions could create larger consequences. A single conversation, a single assumption, or a single choice could influence how people viewed each other and how communities trusted their institutions. That was why he remained patient. He understood that emotions could easily take control, but meaningful change came from thoughtful responses. Daniel Whitaker continued handling the situation according to what he believed was his responsibility. He followed the information available to him and approached the matter as he would any other situation during his shift. He did not know that the person in front of him had spent years representing the community inside courtrooms. He did not know that Marcus had dedicated his professional life to understanding the relationship between authority and fairness. From Daniel's perspective, the situation was about following procedures. From Marcus's perspective, the situation was about observing how those procedures were applied. Neither man raised his voice. Neither man turned the encounter into a personal confrontation. Instead, the quiet tension came from something much deeper. It came from the difference between what was visible and what remained unknown. Marcus knew that many people would treat him differently if they discovered his position. A title could open doors. A reputation could change conversations. But he believed those things should never be the reason someone receives respect. The true measure of fairness was how people treated others before knowing their importance. As the situation continued, Marcus remembered lessons from his years in law. Justice was not only about the final outcome. It was about the process that led there. It was about whether people were heard, whether decisions were made carefully, and whether responsibility was accepted when mistakes occurred. Those principles applied everywhere, including moments far away from a courtroom. Daniel also began noticing that there was more to the situation than he first understood. The calm confidence of the person in front of him suggested a level of experience that was difficult to ignore. There was a sense that Marcus had handled challenging situations before, situations where patience mattered more than immediate reactions. The realization created an important question. How often do people make judgments before they have the complete story? How often do appearances become the first explanation before facts are discovered? The streets around them continued moving as normal. The city continued its daily rhythm. Yet within that quiet moment, something larger was developing. A simple decision involving a vehicle was becoming a lesson about perception, responsibility, and the importance of seeing people beyond the surface. Marcus did not know exactly what would happen next. Daniel did not know how significant this encounter would become. But both were standing at the beginning of a moment that would eventually force everyone involved to examine what true accountability really meant. As the afternoon continued, the meaning behind the encounter became more complicated than anyone expected. What began as a simple situation involving a vehicle was slowly becoming a moment that revealed how people respond when they do not have the complete story. Marcus Reynolds remained calm because he understood something that many people only learn after years of experience. A person's position does not define their worth, and a misunderstanding does not have to become a conflict. The way people respond in uncertain moments often reveals more about their character than the situation itself. Marcus had spent decades inside the legal system, watching how decisions affected real lives. He knew that fairness was not created only through laws and courtrooms. It was created through everyday choices made by ordinary people. The conversations they had, the patience they showed, the willingness to listen before making conclusions. That belief was one of the reasons Marcus had earned respect throughout his career. He never wanted people to trust him because of his title alone. He wanted them to trust the principles he represented. Meanwhile, Daniel Whitaker continued processing the situation from the perspective of his own responsibilities. He believed in doing his job correctly and following the standards expected of him. Like many professionals, he relied on training and experience to guide his decisions. But every professional faces moments where information is incomplete and assumptions can influence judgment. The challenge is recognizing that every person involved may have a story that is not immediately visible. Daniel still did not know the full identity of the man standing near the vehicle. He did not know that Marcus was responsible for leading major legal decisions in the county. He did not know that the person he viewed as part of a routine situation was someone who spent his career protecting the principles behind the law. Marcus noticed something important during the encounter. People often treat others differently after learning their accomplishments. A person who seemed ordinary suddenly becomes important once a title is revealed. But Marcus believed that was exactly when society needed to reflect. Respect should not arrive only after recognition. It should exist from the beginning. The value of a person should not depend on their job, their influence, or the name attached to them. As the moment continued, the contrast between visible authority and hidden responsibility became clearer. Daniel carried a badge that immediately showed his role. Marcus carried years of service that were not visible from the outside. One represented the enforcement of rules. The other represented the purpose behind those rules. Both roles mattered. Both required judgment. Both required responsibility. The difference was that only one of them knew the complete picture at that moment. The city continued moving around them, unaware that a quiet interaction was creating a lesson about fairness and accountability. There were no dramatic scenes, no public attention, and no immediate recognition. There was only a decision, a conversation, and two people standing on opposite sides of an incomplete story. But soon, the missing information would come to light, and everyone involved would have to reconsider what they thought they understood. The missing information that had remained hidden throughout the encounter was finally beginning to surface, and with it came a completely different understanding of what had happened. For Daniel Whitaker, the situation had started as a routine responsibility. He had looked at the details available to him and responded based on what he believed was expected of him. But as more information became known, he realized that the person connected to the vehicle was not simply another individual in the community. Marcus Reynolds was the district attorney of Brookdale County, a person whose entire professional life had been dedicated to understanding the balance between authority and fairness. The discovery changed the atmosphere, but it did not change Marcus. He remained the same person he had been from the beginning. He did not suddenly demand special treatment. He did not use his position to create pressure. Instead, he continued to approach the situation with the same patience and calmness he had shown before anyone knew his name. That choice revealed something important about leadership. True responsibility is not shown when people recognize your importance. It is shown when you act with integrity before anyone knows who you are. Daniel reflected on the moment and understood that the situation represented a larger lesson. Every day, officers across America interact with people whose backgrounds and experiences are unknown. A person standing in front of them may be a business owner, a teacher, a veteran, a community leader, or someone who has quietly spent years serving others. Without that information, the only thing visible is the moment itself. Marcus had always believed that justice required looking beyond the surface. He knew that decisions made too quickly could affect people in ways that were impossible to see immediately. That was why he had built his career around careful consideration and equal treatment. The principles he defended inside courtrooms also mattered in everyday encounters outside them. The situation involving his vehicle became a reminder that fairness is not only tested during major legal cases. It is tested during ordinary moments when people have limited information and must decide how they will respond. Daniel began to understand that professionalism required more than following procedures. It required humility and the willingness to recognize when a situation was more complex than it first appeared. The badge he carried gave him authority, but it also carried responsibility. Meanwhile, Marcus recognized that his own position carried responsibility as well. Being a district attorney meant protecting the public trust, even when he was personally involved in a difficult moment. He understood that using the system properly was more important than using his title for personal advantage. The encounter had started with an unanswered question. Who was the person behind the vehicle? The answer revealed more than a professional title. It revealed a lesson about how people are treated before their stories are known. A name could change the way others viewed someone, but it should never determine the respect they receive. As the truth became clear, the focus shifted away from the vehicle and toward something much bigger. It became a question of judgment, accountability, and whether authority would always be guided by fairness. The truth about Marcus Reynolds changed the way everyone viewed the encounter, but the most important question was no longer about who he was. It was about what the situation revealed about responsibility and the systems designed to protect fairness. Marcus had the opportunity to end the misunderstanding immediately by using his position as district attorney, but he chose a different path. He believed that accountability meant allowing the process to work as it was intended. His role in the justice system was not a reason to receive different treatment. It was a reason to hold himself to an even higher standard. Marcus understood that public trust depended on consistency. The law could not be respected if it only applied when convenient. It had to be respected during ordinary moments, difficult conversations, and situations where emotions could easily influence decisions. Daniel Whitaker began thinking differently about the encounter as well. Learning Marcus's identity forced him to look beyond the immediate circumstances and consider the larger meaning of his actions. He realized that every decision made by someone in authority could affect how people viewed the institutions they represented. A single interaction could influence trust far beyond the individuals involved. That realization was not about creating blame. It was about recognizing the responsibility that came with wearing a badge. Police Chief Robert Hayes was also informed about the situation and understood the importance of reviewing what had occurred. His responsibility was not only managing the department but also protecting the relationship between law enforcement and the community. He knew that accountability was not a sign of weakness. It was a necessary part of maintaining public confidence. Strong institutions were not built by pretending mistakes never happened. They were built by examining decisions, learning from them, and improving. As the review began, the focus shifted from personal opinions to facts. What happened? How were decisions made? Were the proper steps followed? These questions mattered because accountability required more than assumptions. It required honesty and careful examination. Marcus supported that approach because it reflected the same values he had defended throughout his legal career. Justice was not about seeking personal victory. It was about finding the truth and ensuring that principles were respected. The situation also created a larger conversation throughout Brookdale County. Many people began discussing how quickly assumptions could shape interactions between individuals who did not know each other's full stories. A person could be judged by a brief moment without anyone understanding the experiences, responsibilities, or achievements behind them. Marcus's story reminded people that identity was deeper than appearance or circumstance. Daniel's experience reminded people that authority required constant reflection. Both lessons connected to the same idea. Power must always be guided by fairness. The vehicle that started the situation was no longer the center of attention. The real issue was the responsibility carried by those who serve the public. Marcus had spent his career protecting the meaning of justice. Daniel had spent his career enforcing the rules that supported the community. Now both men found themselves connected by a moment that would test whether those principles were truly being followed. The next step would not be decided by emotion or reputation. It would be decided by evidence, accountability, and the commitment to do what was right. The review of the situation continued, and the focus moved from the unexpected encounter itself to the deeper questions surrounding responsibility, trust, and the role of authority in the community. For Marcus Reynolds, the process represented something he had always believed in. Justice was not only about reaching a conclusion. It was about ensuring that the path toward that conclusion was fair, transparent, and based on facts. Even when he was personally connected to the situation, Marcus understood that the principles he defended as district attorney had to apply to everyone, including himself. He did not want special treatment. He wanted the same standard of accountability that he expected throughout the justice system. That decision showed the difference between having power and understanding the responsibility that comes with it. Marcus had spent years watching people make decisions under pressure. He knew that mistakes could happen, but he also knew that growth depended on the willingness to examine those decisions honestly. Meanwhile, Daniel Whitaker faced an opportunity for reflection that extended beyond one afternoon. He began considering how many people he had encountered throughout his career whose stories he never fully knew. Every person carried experiences that were invisible at first glance. Some carried professional achievements. Some carried personal responsibilities. Some carried years of service that the world might never recognize. Daniel understood that his role required him to approach every person with fairness because authority was measured not only by what someone could do, but by how they chose to use that ability. Police Chief Robert Hayes recognized that the situation had become larger than a single interaction. The department's responsibility was not simply to respond when problems appeared. It was to build systems that encouraged trust before problems occurred. He believed that strong leadership required honesty, even when difficult questions needed to be answered. A respected institution was not one that never faced criticism. It was one that listened, reviewed, and improved. The community also began looking at the situation from a broader perspective. Many people understood that the issue was not only about a vehicle or a single decision. It represented a larger conversation about how assumptions could influence interactions between people with different experiences and responsibilities. The encounter reminded many that fairness could not depend on knowing someone's title or background. Respect had to exist before introductions were made. As Marcus continued his work as district attorney, he remained focused on the responsibilities that had guided him throughout his career. He did not seek attention from the situation. He did not view the moment as an opportunity to prove his importance. Instead, he saw it as another reminder of why justice required patience and understanding. Daniel also continued his duties with a renewed perspective. The experience became a lesson about the importance of looking beyond first impressions and recognizing that every decision could have a lasting impact. What started as a simple situation involving a car became a powerful example of how accountability works. It showed that authority without reflection can create distance, but authority guided by fairness can create trust. The greatest lesson was not about one person winning and another person losing. It was about recognizing that every public servant carries a responsibility to protect the dignity of the people they serve. And when that responsibility is taken seriously, even difficult moments can become opportunities for progress. The final outcome of the situation was not defined by anger, reputation, or the positions held by the people involved. It was defined by the choices made after the truth became clear. For Marcus Reynolds, the experience became another reminder of why he had dedicated his life to the justice system. He had always believed that the purpose of law was not only to resolve conflicts, but to protect the dignity of every person who came into contact with it. His own situation tested that belief in a very personal way. Instead of using his position as district attorney to demand a different response, Marcus allowed the process to move forward based on facts and accountability. That decision reflected the values he had carried throughout his career. He believed that justice was strongest when it applied consistently, even when the circumstances involved someone with influence or authority. The attention surrounding the encounter eventually faded, but the lesson remained. People across Brookdale County saw that a title could reveal a person's achievements, but it could never replace character. Marcus had been the district attorney before anyone knew his name. He had been a servant of the community before anyone recognized his position. His actions showed that true leadership was not about receiving respect because of status. It was about giving respect even when no recognition was expected. Daniel Whitaker also carried the lesson forward. The encounter changed the way he viewed his daily responsibilities. He understood that every interaction contained more than what appeared on the surface. A person standing in front of him could have a story shaped by years of service, sacrifice, and experience that would never be visible immediately. That realization did not make his role less important. It made the responsibility behind that role even clearer. The badge represented authority, but it also represented a promise to treat people fairly. Police Chief Robert Hayes used the situation as an opportunity to strengthen the department's commitment to accountability and community trust. He understood that public confidence was built through actions, not statements. When institutions were willing to examine difficult moments honestly, they became stronger. The story of Marcus and Daniel became about more than one vehicle or one encounter. It became a reminder that assumptions can create distance, while understanding can create connection. The most important moments in justice are not always found inside courtrooms or official buildings. Sometimes they happen in ordinary places, during ordinary conversations, when people are faced with a choice about how they will treat someone they do not yet understand. Marcus never needed to prove who he was. His character had already spoken before his title was revealed. Daniel never needed to be defined by one moment. His willingness to reflect showed that growth comes from recognizing the responsibility behind every decision. In the end, the lesson was simple but powerful. Authority can command attention for a moment, but integrity earns respect for a lifetime. A person's true value is not discovered when others learn their position. It is discovered in the way they act when nobody knows their name. And that is where real accountability begins.